My name is Julie, and I'm a 27-year-old woman, and recently I got a call from my mother. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. She called to ask for my help because my sister and her husband had just gone through something really bad. To give you some background, the man who is now my sister's husband was supposed to be my husband once upon a time. My sister, who's 23 and I'll call her Kelly, got together with my fiancé Jack, who is also 27, on the day of my engagement. Jack and I had been together since college, and after almost 3 years, he proposed to me. He even threw a party to surprise me on the night of our engagement. I remember feeling like I was on top of the world until about 2 p.m. that day. I decided to step out into the backyard to get better phone reception, and that's when I saw my sister and Jack. They were making out so passionately that it took them a few seconds to even notice me standing there, completely shocked. I couldn't believe he would do this to me, especially after almost 3 years together, and on the night of our engagement, no less. When they finally noticed me, they quickly pulled apart, but it was too late. I ran to my car and drove as fast as I could to the nearest hotel. I was in complete shock and trying to process what I had just seen, hoping it wasn't true. But then I received a text from Kelly, apologizing and saying she was in love with Jack. Apparently, this had been going on for a long time. I was in my hotel room when I got that text, and I broke down like never before. After that, Jack texted me too, saying pretty much the same thing. He told me that he had only proposed to me because he thought that if he committed to me, he could push Kelly out of his mind. Obviously, that didn't work, and it made him want Kelly even more. He said it wasn't about me, but it was about them, and they just knew they were meant to be together. I was just a stand-in, a way for Jack to eventually meet Kelly. I stayed at the hotel for a few days, trying to pull myself together. I was still feeling lost and trying to convince myself that this was just a bad joke life was playing on me. After almost 5 days, I finally went back home because I needed to get my things and go back to work if I didn't want to get fired. When I got home, I realized that my family had been staying with Jack, all under the same roof, waiting for me to return. It might have been touching if it weren't for the reason I left in the first place. Everyone had been trying to text me and get a response from me nonstop after I disappeared, but I hadn't answered a single one of those messages. So when I finally came back, there was a lot of chaos. Everyone made sure to hug me and tell me how glad they were to see me. Even Kelly had the nerve to come up to me with tears in her eyes and give me a big hug when she saw me. I was too shocked to even react and just stood there silently while everyone crowded around me. Finally, when things calmed down, I cleared my throat and told them that I was only back to get my things and move out for good. Jack had been standing there quietly until that point, but when I said I was leaving, he announced that I didn't need to go because he had already packed his stuff and was moving in with Kelly now that everything was out in the open. My family, including my parents, my aunt, and my dad's youngest sister, who has lived with us since her husband passed away, all had big smiles on their faces. There was nothing to smile about, at least not from my perspective. Kelly stood next to Jack, looking at me sadly but still smiling. I couldn't take it anymore and asked my family what on earth they were smiling about because, as far as I could see, there was nothing to be happy about. I was upset because Kelly had just broken up my engagement and taken away my boyfriend of almost 3 years. There was nothing funny or sweet about it. My mother spoke up and told me that they couldn't change the past, but they could accept the future. They believed that the future had Kelly and Jack together, and even though the relationship started with cheating, they felt sorry about it, but wanted me to understand that this was for the best. Kelly apologized for taking my boyfriend, saying she couldn't help falling in love with him. She wished she had told me earlier, so I didn't have to find out this way, but she said they were deeply in love and wanted to spend their lives together. Then they kissed right in front of me, and my mother even wiped a tear from her eyes. I snapped and told them that this wasn't something to be sentimental about. What they were doing was disgusting. To my surprise, my family got annoyed with me and said I was being bratty instead of being happy for my sister. They thought I was making it all about myself and didn't approve of my behavior. I was shocked by their attitude and told them all to get out of my house. I couldn't understand how they were defending Kelly and Jack while making me look like the bad guy, acting like I was overreacting. My father stepped in and told me not to act like a child because things like this happen and I should just accept it. He said I should be happy that my sister found her soulmate instead of being jealous. It felt like they were all acting crazy and I couldn't deal with it anymore. So I said screw it, went to my room, packed some of my things, and left again without talking to them or listening to what they had to say, even as they called my name and told me not to go. I didn't have anything left to say to them because it was clear that they cared more about Kelly and her happiness than about me or what was right and wrong. They were so focused on justifying what Kelly had done that they completely forgot that I had real feelings too. After that day, my family tried to contact me several times, but I never responded because I didn't think I owed them anything. A couple of weeks later, I even received an invitation to Kelly and Jack's wedding, which I obviously declined. All the friends that Jack and I had in common also declined the wedding invitation to support me, and even a few relatives who knew the truth stopped interacting with my family after they learned how I had been treated. It's been 3 years, and I've cut them out of my life completely. They occasionally tried to get back in touch by wishing me well on my birthday or New Year, but I always ignored them. I never blocked any of them, though I did remove them from my friends list. Since I have a public account, they could still see what I was up to, which is what I wanted. I wanted them to see that I was living a great life and let them feel jealous. It was a bit petty, but it was the least I could do after how they treated me. Until recently, I had no idea what they had been up to in the last few years. About 5 days ago, my mother called me from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered and realized it was her, I tried to hang up, but she begged me desperately for a chance to talk. She sounded so upset that I agreed to listen for a couple of minutes because I couldn't ignore her completely. She told me that Kelly and Jack had started a business a couple of years ago, but it was failing badly. Their investors were backing out because the business wasn't making any profit. They borrowed more money, but even that didn't help, and now they were deep in debt. Loan sharks were after them, and they were being hounded by everyone from their employees to their investors and the people they had borrowed money from. I lived a comfortable life and could afford to help them out, so my mother turned to me as a last resort, begging me to loan them money to pay off their debts. She wasn't asking for a small amount either. She wanted almost $95,000 to help Kelly and Jack. I asked why Kelly wasn't the one calling me if she needed help and why she was making our mother speak to me instead. My mother explained that Kelly and Jack didn't even know she was asking me for help because they had told her not to. I guess they all still remembered what happened 3 years ago. Kelly didn't want me to know about their situation and wasn't ready to take help from me, but my mother didn't know anyone else who could give them that much money quickly. A couple of months had already passed, and Kelly and Jack were struggling even to put food on the table. My parents and Jack's family were helping as much as they could, but it wasn't enough. They had their own futures to think about, especially since most of my family, including Jack's parents, were retired. That's why my mother, with no other options, had called me to ask for help. I could afford to help them, but I really didn't want to. Kelly was right not to contact me for help because they lost the right to ask anything of me the day they cheated on me. I told my mother that I couldn't help them, and even if I could, I wouldn't. She sounded very upset and told me I was being cruel and needed to think about my family. I reminded her that Kelly and Jack didn't think about me when they had their affair, and my family didn't think about me while they supported them. So I didn't see why I needed to think about them now. I had worked hard to get where I am today, and I wasn't going to just give away $95,000 to two people who didn't deserve it. My mother started crying on the phone, saying she never expected me to grow up to be so selfish, and claimed that my sister and her husband would end up in big trouble if I didn't help them out. I told my mother that it was unfortunate, but I couldn't help them, and then I hung up. Since then, she's been sending me text after text, almost every hour, begging me to reconsider and think about my sister. She keeps saying that this isn't the time for petty revenge, and that Kelly is in serious trouble. She warns that if I don't help her now, I'll regret it in the future. My mother is acting desperate, and I don't know what to say to her because I don't want to feel like the bad person here either. Am I wrong for not helping my sister financially after she stole my fiancé 3 years ago? Update: I finally blocked my family. I hadn't done that earlier because, first, I wanted them to see what I was up to and feel jealous, and second, because I thought cutting them off completely might be something I'd regret if something bad happened to them. But now, I don't care anymore. I should have removed them from my life 3 years ago. Keeping them around this long was the real petty thing I did. Refusing to help my sister now isn't petty, it's just the logical thing to do. They've already wasted so much money, and I'm sure that even if I gave them the money now, they wouldn't be able to pay it back. $95,000 is a huge amount, and even though I'm doing well financially, that doesn't mean I can just give away that kind of money without expecting it back. If it were a close friend I was helping, I would still expect to be repaid. But these are people who are close to me, and they're definitely not my loved ones. I can't expect them to pay me back, so there's really no reason for me to help them out. It's as simple as that. I talked to a few of my friends about this to get their opinions, and they agreed that I did the right thing by refusing to give them the money not out of revenge, but because it's completely impractical and foolish to expect me to help the very people who betrayed me in the past. Anyway, my mother is now blocked, and she can't contact me to guilt trip me anymore. I have nothing to worry about, at least that's what I thought. Update 2. Hi everyone, something really big happened today. I was at work when I got a call from my neighbor. She told me there was a couple outside my house, screaming for me to come out and talk to them. My neighbor said they seemed pretty crazy and had been yelling at my door for about an hour, refusing to leave. I asked her to describe them, but deep down, I already knew who it was. When she described them, it just confirmed my suspicion. It was Kelly and Jack. My neighbor insisted that I come back home to deal with them because she didn't think they were up to any good. Given that it was Kelly and Jack, I knew she was right. So I thanked her and immediately started driving back home because I couldn't risk them getting into my house. Luckily, I got there in about 20 minutes and caught them in the act of trying to break into my house by picking the lock on my door. I pulled up in front of my house and demanded to know what they thought they were doing. I tried to call the police right away, but Jack moved like lightning and knocked the phone out of my hand. Kelly walked over and said they were just there to talk, and they didn't want anything from me, at least not right now. I told them to make it quick and made it clear that they shouldn't expect me to invite them inside. Whatever they had to say would have to be discussed outside in the yard. They seemed okay with that, which was a relief because I didn't think it would be a good idea to let them inside. They already seemed pretty hostile, and I didn't know what to expect. Kelly started talking and told me that our mother had informed her about the phone call and how I had ignored the texts that followed and even blocked them all. She said that the way I was behaving was very unfair, and that since it had been 3 years, I should really be over it by now. I was accused of being silly and dramatic, just to get attention from my family. Kelly said she felt insulted because I refused to help them, and that's why she was there to talk to me. She mentioned that she had managed to arrange the money for now by selling their house and all their jewelry, but there was a strong chance she might need more in the future. She wanted to know that she could rely on me for help when that time came. I told her flat out that she couldn't and shouldn't count on me at all under any circumstances because I hated her and her husband with a passion. I was so angry that I warned her it was taking all my self-control not to hit her at that moment, so it would be best if they just left. Jack, shockingly, demanded that they wouldn't go anywhere until I signed a document promising to give them money in the future whenever they needed it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew that such a document wouldn't be legally valid if I was forced to sign it under pressure, and they had to be out of their minds if they thought they could manipulate me into something like that. I told both of them to get out, but Kelly pushed me and said that I had to help them because I owed it to them since we were family. She said I couldn't just run away from my responsibilities like this. I was stunned that she actually pushed me, and I was tempted to slap her. But I held back because I knew that getting violent would only make things worse. Instead, I decided to grab my phone, which had fallen to the ground when Jack knocked it out of my hand earlier, and I made a run for it. I quickly climbed into my car and drove off without even checking my rearview mirror. Luckily, I hadn't turned off the engine when I had left the car, so it was still running, and I was able to get a head start on them. They didn't chase after me on foot, which was a relief, but they stayed at my house, which was unfortunate. Once I was at a safe distance, I decided to call the police and report what was happening. I drove back to my house just in time, arriving shortly before the police got there. Within about 25 minutes, they showed up, and I filled them in on everything that had happened. The police arrested Kelly and Jack and took them away. I knew the charges weren't that serious, and they'd probably get off easily, but it was still worth it because at least they were taken away, and I didn't have to deal with them anymore. A few hours have passed since then, and I haven't heard from anyone in my family, which is strange. I thought by now at least one of them would have tried to contact me from a different number, but they haven't. I'm guessing they're either over everything and won't try to get under my skin again, or they're just waiting for the right time to contact me later when things have calmed down a bit. Update 3. Hi, so my last update was about a week ago, and I had started to believe that my family was finally going to leave me alone after I called the cops on Kelly and Jack. But I was wrong. Even that didn't stop them from bothering me again. This time, it was my parents who showed up at my house, asking if they could talk to me for a moment. This happened yesterday, and they seemed much less arrogant compared to Kelly and Jack, so I decided to let them in. As soon as my mother entered the house, she started crying and apologized for ever taking Kelly's side over mine. My father explained that after they learned Kelly and Jack were arrested because of their behavior, including physically pushing me, they couldn't see them the same way anymore. They had decided to cut them off. My mother kept crying the entire time she was there, while my father continued apologizing for siding with Kelly in the past when it was actually me who was the victim. I told my parents that while I appreciated them finally coming to their senses, it was too little, too late to make things better. I had grown used to living my life on my own terms and didn't want to go back to putting my family before myself. As much as I appreciated their visit and apology, I couldn't promise to work on our relationship because, honestly, I didn't see any point in trying to salvage something that was already broken, even if it was with my parents. They protested a bit, saying that we could fix things if we really wanted to, but that was the problem I didn't want to anymore. I just wanted to be by myself, free from the complications and hurt of the past. I told them I respected their efforts, but I was done trying. They seemed a little disappointed, but eventually they left and asked if I could at least unblock them so they could keep in touch. I did unblock my parents, which feels a bit strange, but for now, that's where things stand. I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm focusing on my own peace and well-being. Stay tuned for more updates on how things unfold.
right, everyone's presentations are done,"
Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward.
"Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me and began to speak. "There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only." "Absolutely right." His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. "I'm leaving." After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email.
Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly.
The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale.
"Nick, is something wrong?" Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam.
My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father.
Well, you could hardly call it being raised.
After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing.
Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school.
Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out.
I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything.
The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke.
Take care. That was our last conversation.
Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment.
Yet, my father never visited me even once.
I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education.
Listen up.
Our work can change the future of our employees.
Don't drag us down.
On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly.
There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle.
At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state.
But that was long ago.
Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose.
I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said?
I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him.
Someone was watching me with a smirk.
In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go.
You are the latter.
It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened.
Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results.
As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty.
Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey.
I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day.
Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today?
Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today.
I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly.
They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job.
Having joined the company wanting to do customer service.
I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look.
To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally,
Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance.
As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick.
If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America.
Nick began the presentations.
Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them.
The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me.
There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer.
He was likely talking about me.
I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently.
Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right.
After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking.
The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation.
Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life.
I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving.
I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home.
The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk.
In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale.
Nick! What's wrong?
Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick.
And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires.
Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen.
They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday.
Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips.
The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally.
President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles.
Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief.
Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction.
Do you know how much revenue we get from that company?
We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs.
Gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan.
If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized.
Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do.
I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you.
Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you.
Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind.
Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening.
After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason.
He was demanding, get his boss here immediately.
It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training.
What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next.
Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation.
If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York.
When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was.
As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor.
I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired.
I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner.
No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread,
hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry.
Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology.
He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done?
Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason.
I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him.
Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand.
I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor.
Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside.
Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I I don't remember that part.
I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers.
Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone.
It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault.
This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf.
He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well.
But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation.
The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared.
Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment?
Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance.
Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too.
It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized.
As for the other requests,
Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load.
I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office.
I was amazed he still hadn't apologized.
You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company.
I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here.
When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it.
Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted.
Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent.
I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned,
I'm moving to the sales department soon.
If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse.
Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it.
On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer.
It's still working hours.
Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer.
Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived.
I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name.
They look good. What are you talking about?
These are plastic bottles.
I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea.
But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company.
It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email.
I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed.
He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important.
You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter.
Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble.
Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation.
Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment.
Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary.
Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too.
I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.